Good afternoon. The UE4 Spring Jam just concluded, and I decided to do a quick video just showing the tech that I used for my game, Dig for Spring. Just a quick overview. The game you are playing, well, this guy, who's floating with balloons. The idea was to dig down to the core of your planet to restart spring. There's like a clock, it's stuck on winter. That's why there's a bit of snow up here in the corner. All the dirt tiles were snowy until you switched the clock. Now this game, I made the planets out of cardboard. You can see it's basically just looks like cardboard and everything is diggable. You can just cut through everything in your planet. Now to do this, this is what I'm mostly going to cover in the video, is how I built this this effect, this little cuttable effect. Quickly, just to explain, and a lot of you, if you haven't already realized, you're going to go, it's simply a mask. I'm simply using a mask translucency to cut a cardboard model. Everything else is a render target. So there's not much to it. It's really simple in that sense. So today I'm going to show how the material is set up. Again, quickly, I'm not going to go in details. Show the material setup, the models, some of the textures used, and some of the other effects. Also, like, you can spin around the planet. Notice the camera is always pointing down towards gravity. So if you go out in space, as soon as you leave the sphere of influence, it switches out. And from here you can actually go and fly to the other planets. I had put these springs, you can see one over here, these little spring platforms to actually launch you between planets for quick travel. But you can actually just manually fly out and go from planet to planet. So let's quit this. So yeah, the material set up for to achieve this cardboard effect. So basically, if I go in the planetoid folder here, in the material, actually let's go to the mesh. So the world is made up of these cardboard tiles. This is just a simple mesh. Let's see if we can see it well. The mesh is just corrugated cardboard. So the texture comes from an actual picture of cardboard that I then made fixed up to tile, and well, it ends up looking like a piece of cardboard. Now the other thing for the look, I scanned some, I took some Crayola and I did various levels of density application to a piece of paper, and I used these to create a series of masks. These masks have been fantastic for everything from macro texturing to just applying color to any surface. When you go back in here, if I look at any one of my materials, like the stone here, you can see it's applied to the surface for the color. The whole game is using those scans. It was extremely useful for just varying the degree of everything and applying color, making it like you drew on cardboard instead of just looking like a flat color. The other thing too, to get this, well, frayed effect, that the top layer of the cardboard is shredded off. Again, the surface mask and the if I go back to the cardboard tile, it's actually made of two, sorry, it's made of two materials, the cardboard surface and the cardboard base. So this allowed for, this allowed to actually vary the degree of exposure, well, not exposure, but how much of the cardboard I'm actually showing, if I want to show the corrugated ridges or not. So that's what the world is made of, these cardboard tiles. So if I go back into, if I go in the actual actor here, I can't really see it there. Let's see. Well, let me just create another planet actually. Let's go and put it out here. So if I drag this in, oops. I accidentally selected the skybox. Planetoid 5. Okay, let's drag this out. Let's focus on it. So if I generate the tiles, I can just change the texture I used to whichever, well, in this case it's like the planets. Let's use the sample. There. Okay. So using instant static mesh, I just lay all these cardboard tiles all over the surface of the planet itself. It's done in 3 layers. There's the outer, well, the dirt layer. Then on top of that, you've got the stone layer. And mixed throughout, you've got the foil layer. The foil layer is really just, I created a rectangle that I added some noise to just move the vertices around to make it look more foil-like. That one is, those are the foil tiles. They're very simple. Those are your metals that you can actually dig. So back to the planetoid. Sorry, back to the world. So yeah, this is how this was generated. You can select each texture for the planets. The render target size can also be adjusted, and the radius can also be changed. So if you want it smaller, smaller in low detail, you can put a really small render target size. You can put it really high and it's going to change the density when you dig, because this is basically how high res it samples these maps. So for the material itself, for these tiles, sorry if I'm if I'm a bit lost doing this video. I still haven't slept much since the jam. So if I go into the planetoid ground, so the material to get the cutout look is this monstrosity. It's actually not that bad. It's messy because obviously it was done in a couple days. It was done very quickly. But what you have is everything comes from an opacity mask. That's what gives your cutout. To get the effect of the surface being separated from the back, the actual, like if I go to cardboard base, in this function here, I use the cutoff of 0.25, but in the ground, I use a cutoff of 0.255, which actually means that a little bit more of the data will be shaved off. It's the threshold before it goes solid is higher, So as your input texture's gradient is encountered, the surface will be masked out before the back layer. So everything in the effect to cut out the cardboard and everything is coming in from this function here, MF isosurface. This is where all the work actually is. So what it does is it samples the texture and just finds the borders at the threshold. So if you put, like in this case, 0.25, if the value goes from below 0.25 to higher than 0.25, it's going to return 1. The other thing I had to do, since I was magnifying the actual render target texture source heavily, is I did not like what the magnification filters, the built-in interpolation that the pixel shaders would do. I really did not like the result. It was giving me odd edges, the edges weren't smooth. It was sometimes having some noise would show up. I really didn't like it. So this isosurface function here, what it actually does is it samples the render target. It finds a point. It will multiply by size, floor it, take the fractional of it too, divide it back, so it's changing it to grid values directly for the sampling texture. If I preview here, can you actually see the squares? No, you can't. Okay, so that was pointless. Anywho, so by reading the exact points, and then after that I would do a bilinear filter inside the material. So reading point 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1 around the location you are, and using the fractional to get the weights, re-adding and re-adding all these values together multiplied by their weights was allowing me to, let me start previewing here, allows me to get these nice line divisions between between the levels, because I then do a series of ifs if it's below or above threshold, and return each of the RGB. And well, actually I dropped the alpha in the end. I decided to just go with 3 to do basically an isolinear map of the colors. This bilinear filter was not necessary, frankly. I could have done with just the ifs, but I really did not like the lines from the magnification. If I take the texture directly, let's see, if I take this directly and push it in here to the if, it is not happy. Oh wait, I need this one. Oh, right now it's set to point filter, so it's not actually doing the lines. It's saying nice and pixelized, so that doesn't really show anything. But yes, the built-in interpolation between the pixels for when you magnify, I was not happy with it, so I changed it to my own interpolation that made smooth lines for when you zoom in. So if you go to a planet and you start digging, you get the edges are smooth. You don't have pixelized edges or anything like that. It through the render target. This is only a 5 for this planet. Let me go ahead and space to so we can see the whole thing. So this entire planet is driven by a 512 by 512 texture. It's pretty low, well, it's relatively low res for the amount of cells and data that for the size of the planet. So this interpolation just allowed for very smooth transition. If I switch to the dog, he's digging continuously versus like with the shovel that it's every strike, and it's just growing out quite nicely. You can see the edge just building out as the dog hits the surface. So that was the material setup, and again, it's just to get all these layers, it's simply all the tiles are simply added on, and it's multiple layers of these sets of tiles, which I just increase based on radius the amount that I put, and then I just do the material cutout, and that's it. I did the same thing for the foil, same thing for the stones and the ground. So the material was very, very simple. The render target itself is when you dig, for example. Well, actually, when you dig, it just added to a queue. I was doing this, originally I was updating every frame, but it was a bit more performant to actually flush a queue to do it all at once. So all you did is I took all of these, well, everything in the queue, which I would then, right here, for each element in the queue, then I would start a excuse me, I would start, oh, where is it? I would do a begin draw canvas to render target, which I can't seem to find. There it is. So begin draw to canvas to render target. And from there I would loop through every queued digging spots and do just a draw material with the digging texture, which is simply an inverted paraboloid that's returning negative value, and I would draw that to the render target, making holes. Now these would come in at different radii and intensity, so there's a bunch of multiplication just to increase the strength of how much. Material filter also, because like the shovel does not dig through stone, the pick does not do dirt until you upgrade your pick. So these effects, there was just a filter from the tools, all in this well, this digging queue item, which was where to dig, how big, how strong, and then which material layers are actually affected and by how much. One of the complications that I did encounter is because everything is being rendered off of is being run off of a render target and not actually being there you go, you can see the squares of the tiles, that it's the corrugation. It's recompiling the shaders now. Because this was running off render target, I did not have collisions. This was just graphic. The tiles, the empty tiles, you're flying between them. You don't actually have any collision surfaces. You don't have anything solid. So this actually brought quite a complication for how to collide my character, because he is solid. He will not cut through the ground. If I throw the dog, he will dig and collide with the ground. So this was a problem. What I had to do is I have to manually sample the render buffer, the render target, and I do 8 points around the main character. The best way to show it is to actually turn on debug. Let's go back into Planetoid. It's get normal at location. So you can see where it's actually hitting. And all these, I do, like I said, I sample multiple points around the character and return that normal. And then you take that normal and you apply it to your velocity vector, cancel out anything that is going through the dirt or going through solid wall. You cancel it out, and then your character obviously won't move in that direction. But that's what I had to do. I had to actually go sample, read the texture, get the value, calculate those normals out, flush out, loop through all that, and cancel them out. If I go into the actual character, in the player, and I believe it's in collision to ground. Apply force and collision to normal. There we go. So from here, I would come in with the force, movement force. The main character is not affected by gravity. The dog is, so the dog gets gravity instead. By the way, on the planets, as you get closer to center, the gravity is less because the material, there's as much material around you than below you. And you can see if you're around the seasonal clocks in the center and you throw a dog, he just floats instead of falling. Because originally the character you had to also fight with gravity as you played, and that was just too much trouble to control. So I go through every normals that I've received. I loop through them. I go to each velocity, the velocity vector, I project it along, and then set physics linear velocity. I just cancel it out as I go. Also, I add force, the force of movement after canceling it out. That's where I add the impulse to move around. So before even applying the direction I'm moving, I cancel out all the directions that I don't want to go. So that's how collisions were done, because I'm off of a render target, not off of the actual geometry. The geometry is only visible. To show it, if I take the static mesh and I make it visible and not hidden in game, this big black square is actually my debug surface, which, oh, just let me change something that I added last second. So let's see, background, hide it. Okay. So now if I go into the planet, you can actually see the collision surfaces. For some reason it's not very visible here. Let me switch to a smaller planet. This is the setup I use for debugging collision. My read buffer was actually shown on a just on a flat square behind the main character. There we go. So this is showing the actual read buffer. For some reason it's showing me the metallic layer, not the ground layer right now. Must have been the last thing I was debugging was which metal I was hitting. But yeah, this is the actual read render target. Every 10 times a second, if I go back to the planetoid, there is an update read height map. So not 10 times yet, 10 times a second, I actually take the full planet render buffer and render it down to the read render buffer to just then, which is, in this case I was using 64 by 64. This goes through a bit of C++ to extract the values, and that's how I did get ground value, was to read from that saved render buffer to just get all the values directly. See, height map reader, I have one for each layer. So each height map reader I ask for, give me the values at this location, give me the values at this location. And from here I got all the normals for each color channel plus the actual value of the material at that level. So when I'm digging to know how much to add to my inventory, like was it like 10 dirt, 5 gold, things like that, I get the value from this value and the normals for the collision. The other thing of note of this game was the art style. Other than the cardboard, I also made the characters out of pipe cleaners. So the pipe cleaners, they're just this little wobbly stick. They actually have, I'll try to focus on it. They actually have a wire in the center that is actually coiling, and all these fins, which is the little fuzzy, the little fuzziness, that's from the material of the material here. If I switch that to, let's just say, to straight metal, you can see it's just these spiraling flat cards or flat planes that are all around the metal wire. This allowed me to quickly change, like if I wanted the silver foil for the tools. The shirt is blue on the main character, so I don't want the end in blueprint. Animations, there, idle animation. So yeah, he's just a series of sticks that I did in 3D Studio. I curved the sticks around for the round areas. Like the dog, same thing, fur color. You can see the wire actually inside the fuzziness. And this is just animated regular bone animation. The pipe cleaner is bent pretty well. I didn't do a very good job with the weights. I didn't have time. I just kind of went with whatever the default, so there's some weird deformation, but because of all the noise of the pipe cleaner fuzz, it actually didn't really matter. And since when you're playing, you're not getting too close to the character at the time anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. But that was the other look for the game. So it gave the whole thing a kind of manually arts and craft look for the whole game. That's what I was going for. If I go back to the player, let me just remove this mesh. So yeah, other than that, you had the catalog. You could, for whatever material you pick up, you can then spend it, get some upgrades. The upgrades increase the size of the dig effect and the intensity, the radius, all of these simple things. So you had actual tool progress and everything. And yeah, the game had, well, as 4 planets. These launch pad springs. I added these big arrows to allow me to aim where I was sending them to the other planets. And that's it. The goal is to switch over all these clocks. So if I put my main character directly in the clock chamber, I took out the background so you can see the texture, the texture for the atmosphere spinning around. So if you're directly in here, you touch this, the dirt will lose all of its white. So this planet has been switched to spring, and like I said, if you throw a dog in here, he just floats. There's no gravity in the center, or the gravity is very weak. So thank you for watching. This was a quick overview of what I did for my jam and how the effect of the cardboard and the pipe cleaner, the digging, all of this was achieved. Thank you very much. Have a good day.